Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and the changes of midlife and empowers you to live a more vibrant second half. If you find us today on YouTube, please remember to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any more of these amazing conversations. If you're on a podcast platform, please remember to subscribe, rate, and share the conversation that you're going to hear today. Today, my guest started her company because as she saw people leaving corporate life, she noticed that they felt lost and they were limiting themselves to what they could do. So she thought, why do people think they have to limit themselves to what they can do? There are so many opportunities. My guest today is Victoria Tomlinson. She's the founder and CEO of Next Up. She's a TEDx speaker and an unretirement advocate. Victoria, thank you so much for being on my show today.
Hi there, Gina. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. It's lovely. And I'm loving what you're doing here because it absolutely fits with what we want to do to help, particularly women, but people from all sorts of backgrounds.
You know, we were chatting before I hit record that, we have this idea about retirement, or we have a dialogue around the concept of retirement. It's like the end, right? It's like retirement is the end. And then we're supposed to do what? And so that's why I wanted to have a conversation with you. And I'd love to know a little bit more about this mission of Next Up and why you began. And what age were you when you started this journey?
So I launched Next Up at 63, which was 4 years ago. And, sometimes things all happen. You get lots of things happening together and you step back. And actually, I brought a professor in to look at our business. And he was the one, he spotted, you're working with a whole bunch of people who are they were individuals who had, as you said, left corporate life. I'm trying to avoid this word retirement because it doesn't really fit with how they saw themselves. And it's not a word that this generation are really relating to. So they had left corporate life and they had just thought things would happen. They hadn't planned for it. They didn't think they needed to. And then they started trying to apply for things when things didn't happen. And they found that they'd left things too late to start, particularly if people were looking for what we call a non-exec career, if you like, getting non-executive roles. They hadn't got the track record to get them. And it's one of those catch-22 things. You need experience to get the roles. And they were really lost. So this was men and women, I have to say. And they were really struggling. And yet I looked at them and thought, what's happening here? 1 minute you were at the top of your game. People were coming to you for advice. You were leading large companies or charities or whatever. And then suddenly you retire. And the next day, who are you? You don't have an identity. You've lost your network of colleagues. And it was like a bereavement for people. And in fact, what we do, Gina, is we're helping people and we use what's called the grief curve. I don't know whether you've come across that when you suffer a bereavement, there are a series of emotions that most people will go through. And you go through, it's a sort of curve and you go down in it. And initially there's usually anger and guilt and anxiety. You hit some form of depression for most people. Now, some people it may be fleeting and others it may be a long time. And then you start getting acceptance and then enthusiasm again. And I was seeing people in this sort of downward or at the bottom of the curve, and they couldn't quite believe what was happening to them. And the biggest issue was that people talk about retirement as if it's a joyous time. And nobody's actually saying, I'm having a really awful time, because they think it's them individually, a personal failure. And actually, it's everybody is going through some kind of emotional, real challenge here. But because they're not talking about it, each person subsequently is thinking, oh, it's just me. Everyone else is kind of skipping into the sunlight. So one of the things we now started doing is we're running workshops. We're working with professional firms and corporates. I've just become a tech entrepreneur, Gina, at 67. And we've just signed up a major corporate to test our platform with 350 employees. I am sort of over the moon. It's literally happening this week. And what we're hoping to do, what we're doing is helping people understand that impact, but then get them to thinking about giving them ideas, loads and loads of ideas. what do other people do, and giving them inspiration. And what they do is come out excited, and then it's up to them. We give them steps to create a plan. So it's really kind of affirming, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, you talked about the grieving process. I'd never heard it as a curve, but that's a really great way of describing it. And that grief is not what we expect to feel. I'm right. Like I was sharing with you my story, which if people have been listening to me, they know that I kind of stopped everything to take care of all the needs of my mother-in-law for 3.5 years. And at the end of that, I had this podcast, and I had to start over. I'm still in that place of reinventing myself again. And there is a grieving process to, I don't know if losing is the right word, or no longer having the things that you loved, possibly, or they define you, right? Because that's what jobs do. They become your life. They become your identity. And that gets taken away.
Exactly that. So you lose your identity, you lose your sense of purpose. Why do I get up in the morning? And you lose that social contact. And particularly men, actually, but it's also the same to some extent for women. A lot of men, really, their only social contact is either family or their work colleagues. And they haven't thought about how important work colleagues are for them. And it just might be that you go, in this country, we go down to the pub on a Friday night or something, or you might catch up people for a lunch or coffee or whatever. And you're not realizing how that is a huge part of your social contact or life or whatever. Take that away, and then what have you got? And for a lot of people, not much left, actually. And they have to completely think about rebuilding. The biggest issue is that bit about finding purpose. And a lot of people talk about, I think one of the problems is people get exhausted with work, the traditional 24/7 treadmill work, and they focus on stopping that. They don't focus on, what am I going to start instead? So they can't wait to stop that getting up in the morning. A lot of the people I work with, they seem to have been on planes and trains, Mumbai airport at 3 o'clock in the morning. What am I doing here? 5 o'clock on a train, why am I doing this? So they're all absorbed about the kind of lifestyle they don't want. I can't wait to stop. And then when you stop it, you haven't realized how much of everything is tied up in that role, and they haven't really got something to replace it. Now, a lot of people have got plans to go traveling and catching up with family, and that's great. And I've seen a lot of people where they're really happy maybe for the first 6 months, and they've got lots of things they want to do. Traveling is, particularly now that COVID's over again, they're back to traveling. But then they wake up one morning and suddenly think, have I got another 20, 30, 40 years of this? And it kind of feels very empty. So it's really thinking about, what am I going to do to replace that? And I don't think most people I see, they don't want another 24/7 career, but they do want to feel they've got a lot of skills, and they feel, I'm just wasting these. I could help so many people. Maybe one of the things we get people to do is to mentor tech entrepreneurs, which is amazing. And initially they would all go, oh, I'm not techie, I can't do it. I go, don't you worry. These youngsters, they know all they need to know about the tech. The bit that they haven't got experience in is managing people. A lot of them struggle to explain their business to the older generation, if you like. They're very techie in what they're saying. And to translate that into something that investors will buy, or to their customers. So this generation can offer so much to such a wide variety of people, and it's really helping them. Some people need to earn money still, if we're being honest. So, that's important to help. Well, how are you going to do that? Or just kind of finding that purpose.
It really is a reason to get out of bed in the morning, right? That's what we're looking for, that thing that kind of makes us excited about the day. Not that we're excited every day, but it's good to have something to look forward to.
It is. And it was interesting, I've been asking people what they miss, and there was, particularly from professional firms that we do a lot with sort of lawyers and accountants, And they were saying they miss working with young, bright people hugely, because that sort of keeps you young as well. You know, you get quite challenged with the younger generation, and it sort of makes you think, oh, how are they looking at this? Which is really good for us. I think it's really bad just to stay with your own generation because you just age. Whereas the youngsters they keep challenging you, and you have to think, do I agree with that or not? But it's really interesting to think about their perspective. And the thing that a lot of them missed was what they said was the chase. So going for something really big, and I get that because that's what I'm doing with my business now. I'm trying to get big corporates on board to buy. And you will have noticed, Jean, I'm a bit excitable this week because of this. You know, I've got a beta tester away, and it's fantastic. And it really makes you feel like somebody believes in you. You've produced something that's got value. And my goodness, I don't care that I'm 67, but I am giddy like a little kid again with, oh my goodness, we might have achieved something here. And I love helping other people. And it's the thought that this is a route to helping so many people. It's really exciting and very rewarding.
What are some of the ways that you help direct people to possibilities? Because if they haven't thought beyond the thing they did for 20, 30 years, it is difficult to shift gears, isn't it?
It is. So what we do, we're hugely about storytelling and sharing other people's stories. So it's not necessarily about us. It's about what do other people do. So our website is next-up.com, and we have peer stories there. So we have got loads of stories, people sharing what they did and their journeys, the ups and downs of it. And what we've done is, with the platform that we've created for corporates, we bring all these stories in. When we do workshops, we bring real people into the workshops. They come and share their stories. And we also look at the skills that people need for this next stage. So you have to be careful of the language. It can sound very corporate, so I try and kind of make it relevant for everybody. But, you know, this bit about your identity, what people tend to slip into is when people say, oh, hi, you know, who are you? What do you do? They slip into, well, I was, you know, whether it was a hairdresser or a beautician or a lawyer or whatever, instead of saying, I am, you know, what I am doing now. And, you know, I think the I was is quite demotivating for yourself. And it doesn't help people to think who you really are. You know, you've got an identity that's apart from what you used to do as a job. So we talk about that and help people to come up with an I am. And one of the ways this business started was I was working with people who had hated social media generally, but particularly LinkedIn. And when they're on their own, I don't know about in America, I think you're probably the same as we are here. You don't have telephone directories anymore. You can't go and look somebody up to see, where's Gina? And I know roughly your address, and I'll try 3 or 4 people and find you. It's not there anymore. So how do you find people? And actually, that's sort of the way of getting people to think, and social media is a great way for people to find you and to engage. And I think it was quite sad that the way most of my generation saw social media was through their children, through going on Facebook. And they kind of looked at I can think of so many friends going, it's vacuous, you know, why are they talking in this way on social media? So they've dismissed it without looking at the huge benefits. And if you kind of really look at it, and I call it being strategic with LinkedIn, and people go, you can be strategic with LinkedIn. I go, yes, you can. And so we show them how to do that. And, you know, thinking about, I call it 20 conversations. So I get people to think of something they might like to start thinking about researching. And I get people to think about the best, I'm going to call them networkers, but you know how in any circle of friends, there's always somebody you say, go and talk to. I'm sure, Gina, you're probably one of those. Talk to Gina. Jill knows somebody who can introduce you or find somebody. So you go and think about those people and then go and have a coffee with them or a chat and just say, what are you up to at the moment? And what challenges have you got? You know, you were talking earlier, Gina, about how you're yourself thinking, you know, you've had gone through a difficult, challenging time with your mother-in-law. And you're now thinking about, what do I do next and how do I promote the podcast maybe more, to go wider. And someone might be listening and thinking, that's quite interesting, I could help you with that. And so what I say to them is just offer to help. First of all, be interested. If you're listening to it and thinking, I really am not interested in this, then don't go and just do it for the sake of it, clearly. But if it's something that they're saying and you think, well, a couple of hours a week, afford to do it for free, that's the best thing. And just to say, would you like a hand? And it's the old story of one thing leads to another. So somebody comes and helps you and you get chatting and you say, do you know what? Someone down the road said they wouldn't mind a bit of a hand with something, or someone else is thinking of setting up. Could you go and talk to them? And someone eventually might have a bit of money and, you might find something comes out of that. It's 20 conversations. You can go and have 20 conversations, something will come out of that. And it may not be the end result, but it'll get you started. And over time, you can start refining. And every now and again, every few months, maybe 6 months, you stop and think, what's going on in my life? Am I loving it? Am I not? What's going well? What am I not enjoying? And what do I want to do more of? And start planning and kind of getting rid of the things that you're not really enjoying. And things start happening. And what we say is, I think it takes around 2 to 5 years from, let's call it unretiring, leaving corporate life, whatever, your main job, whatever we say, to get to where people think, what, this is feeling good. I don't know what it would look like. And it still keeps evolving. It's good.
Mm-hmm. As you're talking, I'm thinking that of people, and we tend to stay in a lane that we've been in, which could be fine. But I think for a lot of people, there's something else that they're either not seeing or that they've forgotten that they're interested in. And so I think this whole part about curiosity and maybe being more experimentational about the things you're thinking of. Do you talk about that as well?
Yes, well, one of the people who there were a lot of people that I met just all around the same kind of time, and one of them was Jules, and she had been head of an executive education part at a really top business school, and she had moved to be near to her parents and didn't really know anybody. And someone said, would you just meet her for a coffee, because she just wants to find something to do, going back to what I was saying earlier. And when I met her for coffee, she was just coming up to 60 then. And I said to her, what are you thinking of doing and things? And she said, I always had this idea for a business. And I love people who are starting businesses. And I'm always kind of grabbing hold of them. Well, yeah, what happened to that? I said, well, I'm about to be 60. Yeah, well, so what? And she said, well, all my friends are retiring and they want me to go and play golf and, spend time with them. I said, well, you don't have to. I said then, I think I was just a little bit younger than she was at the time. And I said, I'm going to work for another 20 or 30 years. And she laughed because she said later, I looked at you and thought, if you can work for another 20 or 30 years, I can certainly work for another 20, 30 years. She got to being quite successful without being a bit competitive, actually. And literally, that conversation, all I did was just to switch on a button in her head, which said, I can do this. It's not too old. I could go and start this business. And literally, our coffee turned into lunch. And by the end of lunch, she was launching. She'd even had a name in her mind. And she was off. And she knew exactly how to sell. She had an accountant she could get to sort things out. And literally, she got a client within a month or two. And she's been doing all of this since then. And she's very happy. And it's a nice lifestyle. She does some of that working, but it's not full 100% time. And we just laugh now and again. We were just setting up to have a drink next week. And I want to catch up. But every time she says, just to think I could have been retired. And she's playing golf. And she is playing golf with her friends. But she's doing other things as well. So, she's got the best of both worlds, really.
And, as you're telling the story, I can hear your energy on her behalf. Like, you're excited about what you're doing and you're excited about what she's doing. And I think we have this idea possibly that there's this I've had someone say, when are you going to slow down? I'm like, when I die, probably. I mean, why do I have to slow down?
Exactly. Well, I think you'll know that our dear Queen died just recently, and
Yes.
she was meeting our new Prime Minister then. It's changed a bit since, but never mind. But she met our new Prime Minister 3 days before she died, and she might have been using a stick and a bit little difficult walking, but she was still all there. She was 96 years old, and do you know what? That is my dream, that you're still active and contributing in your 90s, and that you're until you die. And I think one of the things we're seeing now is when people give up, it's not at all healthy. And
Mhm.
what I found really weird, Gina, is when I talk about this, I haven't got great health and I've spent quite a lot of time in hospital in the last year or two, well, all my life, but never mind about that. But when I chatted to doctors and nurses about what I'm doing, they go, oh, that's brilliant. And then I start talking to them, and all of them say, well, it's really unhealthy when people retire. We see people dying within 2 years of retiring. And I can't find this. If anybody listening knows how to get hold of these stats, I can't find them anywhere. But I would love to get proper research on this, because actually, people who aren't engaged socially with the world, actually, it's really unhealthy. You're more likely to become physically and mentally ill, and you're more likely to die. And it's not great. And this, it's this bit about purpose. You need purpose in your life, and you need social connections. Those are the two things that keep us young and healthy. It's all right about diets and running and exercise and things, but they aren't nearly as important as that purpose and social connections, being engaged socially,
Mm,
whoever with it.
hmm I understand that. When I left the cosmetic retail world right around 50, because I just didn't want to be in retail anymore. And I had a plan, but as we all know, life sometimes happens and derails that plan. But I remember feeling that excitement and being so ready for the next thing. But also, when you work, you have someone else telling you what to do with your days. Even if you're at the top of the food chain, you're not without the structure that guides you through your day and guides you to your activities, your expectations, all of those things. And I think the structure of a working world is part of the adjustment when you unretire, when you leave a job. It's like now you have to do for yourself all the things that were already in place for you when you were working.
No, you're spot on. And I think people don't think about that structure. I mean, what I say to people when I talk about purpose, because to be honest, to British people in particular, it sounds a bit American, if I'm honest, where, you were kind of going to discuss our feelings and, finding purpose and all the rest of it. But what I've said is you won't even have thought about why you've got up in the morning, because when you're working, you've probably got rent or a mortgage to pay, that you have to pay for that. You've got clients, you've got colleagues, you've got things, deadlines. You just have things that are going that you have to get up for, and you don't even think about that. But suddenly, if our generation, a lot of people are lucky to have paid off their mortgages, so they don't have that immediate urgency. And if you're starting to draw a pension as well, money may not be that driver anymore. So you haven't got that money driver. I say that a lot of people still do have a money
Mm-hmm.
driver, so I fully recognize that. But you're not necessarily having that driver. And if you haven't got those clients or colleagues or something where you have to get up for it, actually your day can seem really aimless.
Yeah.
And I mean, some people say they were looking forward to daytime television. It's not something that's ever appealed to me,
No.
but actually you can quickly have enough of it, apparently. So, and I would, from my perception of daytime television, I would think that was right. What do you think at the end of the day? What have you achieved? And how do you feel when you go to bed? That you haven't really sort of done something that's making you feel like that was a good day. I enjoyed today. And that's what you want, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I feel like, you know, when I chose to let everything go because my mother-in-law needed so much attention,
Yeah.
well, that was the thing that was constantly on my mind. So it had
Yeah.
switched. But when she passed away, I was now 3.5 years from what I was building. It was so I was transitioning again. So it's like I went backwards to when I was just turning 50. And so I feel like maybe it's a worthwhile conversation to talk about the process. It is an ongoing kind of fluid experience, I think.
It is. And, that's one of the things that we say to people. It's just like the rest of your life. It doesn't stand still. So, you're always looking at evolving your career when you're younger. What's next? Am I planning towards it? It might look different in shape, but actually it still stays the same. Things change. And, you also get a lot of things. A lot of people that I know, their children start having children, so they become grandparents. And the cost of childcare in this country is absolutely outrageous. So a lot of people are starting to take on childcare duties for their children to help their families. And what they're finding is that it's important to try and keep some kind of life for yourself in there as well. And the grandchildren may be enough. That may be purpose for quite some time, actually, that your children and grandchildren need you. That is great. But actually, grandchildren grow up as well. So it's kind of keeping a weather eye out that you've got other things that you're thinking about for the longer term. And, as they become teenagers, they may not want granny and grandpa quite the same way as they did when they were cute littlies and things. So things change.
Victoria, I feel like that's one of those possible expectations. Like you're going to leave your job and then you're going to just be available to your family. And when I say just, I don't mean to minimize it because that's clearly what happened to me, right? I became that advocate for both my mom and my mother-in-law. And so to your point, I feel that need to figure out that piece that's also fulfilling for me, because it's fine for me personally to have done what I did. It was the right thing to do in that season of my life. And I'm still in that season because my mom is still here. So, but I'm constantly trying to make sure that there's something left for me as well. So I understand that what you're talking about, because sometimes that is the expectation. I don't have grandchildren. That's just not what's in the cards right now. And so for me, I what am I going to do? Just wait for that to happen? What if it never happens? Do you know what I mean? Like there's this, like you said, life is always moving. And I hear what you're saying. And I feel that, like, I have friends who are like, nope, this is all I want. But then I have other people who are like, I am so not done doing something that's going to change the world in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I had a discussion last night with a girlfriend of mine. I was driving somewhere quite long to an evening event, and we caught up on the phone. And she's a bit younger than I am, and she's had a retail shop of her own for the last 10 years. And she's decided, not when the lease is up, that she's giving it up. And I wasn't sure what she was thinking of next. And she said, you know what? I've got a really big career in me still. I want to do something major. And I was delighted to hear that. And I'm now plotting, what can I do to help? So at this event last night, I was just chatting to a couple of people and they were saying she needs to talk too. So we kind of, the girls network, we're all going to kind of think of and introductions. She may not want all that help, but she's going to get it from me. So we're going to kind of get behind her. But you also said something there, Gina, that's interesting, which is this bit about expectations. And we cover that when we're working with people with the platform and with the workshops. And somebody told me about a workshop that she'd been on some years ago. It was done by financial people, and they were in groups. There were all sorts of people, nurses and policemen and firemen and all sorts of public sector people. And they were asking what they were worried about. And actually, one of the big fears was that everybody else had expectations for their time. And actually, I mentioned that with Jules, didn't I, that her friends wanted her to play golf.
Mm-hmm.
And what actually was coming out was people saying, I think my daughter's got plans for me to be babysitting the grandchildren. my wife's got plans for me to make that garden shed or whatever else it might be. So and so. And what they were worried was that everybody had plans to fill their time, and they wanted actually to have time that they were going to fill with what they wanted to do. And actually, one of the things they did was to get people to go and have the conversations. And some of them were right that there were expectations, but actually sometimes they were assuming that everyone was doing it. It wasn't as bad as they thought. So one of the things we say is you need to have really honest conversations with people around you. You need to find out what are their expectations. And actually, I'm seeing quite a lot. I've got it slightly in my own marriage. I absolutely adore my husband. We've been married for 30 something years, but he's at a slightly different stage from me. And I'm still wanting to, he doesn't want to do long haul flights anymore. And it's quite an issue, actually. And I'm trying to find ways around this because we're not quite in tune anymore. And I think people go through, and this stage of life can throw up very different expectations and ambitions still. And I think it's really important to have those honest conversations and not get caught out with them and not just avoid them. And they're quite difficult, actually, because even though I'm used to solving my own and everyone else's problems, I'm a bit stuck on this one, if I'm honest. I can't see an easy way around it. So, but you can't just not have the conversation because it's so difficult.
Mm. Victoria, it's so funny because when I took that trip I was telling you about, my daughter and I, my oldest daughter and I did a 4-week trip to Europe. We did France and England specifically with a little stop into Belgium. My husband and my other daughter met us in London, and we spent a week together there over Mother's Day in 2019. But I took that trip because my husband was like, I don't really want to travel. And I was like, well, I do. So I was like, So I'm going to travel. So for my personality, it's not like I'm traveling all the time and leaving him at home, because that's not realistic. And obviously in this season of our lives, but, there is this for women, and Victoria, you can express if you have seen this or not. We feel a very strong obligation to our families, to other people. And that can cause us to not see opportunities, I think.
I agree with that. I think men also in a different way. I think this is everybody. I think I just see people limiting. I mean, I was working with a group of lawyers last week, and we brought a panel of people in of doing all sorts of different things. And when I went round after the panel had left and went round, discussing what people had got from it, and one of the lawyers said, this has given me confidence to look at some of my wackier ideas. And I said, what? I sort of knew some of them because we'd been talking before, but I said, do you want to share your wacky ideas? And one of them was starting up some kind of keep fit or gym or something for 50 plus generation. Now, to me, there's nothing wacky about that. It's a good idea. There's clearly a gap. Go and research it, get on with it. But it was the fact that, again, he was limiting his own expectation and saying, I didn't really have confidence. This has given me confidence now that I could go and research that. So I think it's men and women, if I'm honest. And I think particularly if you have worked in one organization all your life or most of your life, 20 plus years, it's quite frightening. People talk about the outside world. What's it like in the outside world? Because in a way, it's become a very secure comfort blanket. They know how to make things work. They may not always be very happy in it, but they know what it entails. They know how it works. They know what to expect. And suddenly they're going outside. I mean, some of the things for our lovely lawyers, some of the things of what they think they could earn in the real world, as they put it, is, I'm saying, well, you could do this, but not on 2 days a week. Can I just say that's quite a lot of money in the real world? And it's trying to give them real, because, they've been on very special sorts of earnings, and they don't really understand, even if they do know, they don't really understand what that means and how hard people have to work for that kind of money in the real world. So, it is quite frightening to a lot of people. They don't really know. And that's partly what this 20 Conversations is about. It's actually go and talk to people, listen, understand. and listen more than you talk. Don't talk about yourself. Listen, ask questions, think about what people are saying to you, and really start understanding what goes on and where the gaps are and where there's opportunities for you. It is asking people to become slightly entrepreneurial, but I try to avoid saying that, because all they're doing is just being interested in other people and finding out, and that is interesting.
It's that curiosity, right? Being curious about something.
Yeah, it is.
We
And that's the
forget.
best.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say curiosity keeps you young. That is the best thing to stop you aging.
I think it's easy to feel lost, trying something new. Because you think it when you're a kid, right? You just walk up to anybody and, hey, be my friend. You want to play? Like, we have this lack of fear of new situations and people. But as we age, even into our 20s and 30s, as early as that, we get very safe in our approach to life, right? And anything that's unknown can feel very unsafe. And so, how do you help people, Victoria, shift away from that fear? I mean, not that you can take their fear away, but what things can people be doing in their mindset to help them shift that and open up the possibilities?
A really good point, this. And in fact, I was working with a group of accountants, and a couple of them said, could you help? Because we said at the beginning, is there anything particularly you want us to address when we're working with you? And two of them said in different ways, can you help us deal with rejection and failure? And I thought, well, good for you, because actually that is very thoughtful, thinking about this next stage, because they all of them know they haven't really had much. They might have lost a bit of business or something, but they've got a team around them. It's not very individual, all of this. And I said that's a really, really good question there. So what I've said is, look, it's only rejection and failure if you set yourself up for it to be rejection and failure. This time is yours now. And all you have to do is to say, I'm going to try some things. Some will work and some won't. And all you've got to do is learn from the things that didn't work, brackets, it's not rejection or failure, and make sure you don't go and keep repeating those.
Yeah.
And then learn from what's working and what you're loving. And if you haven't found it yet, keep going until you do find something that will really float your boat. But it isn't about rejection and failure. It's about experimenting. And this is a glorious time of life when, for most people, there's very little to lose. It's just you giving things a go, and it doesn't matter. Provided that the money side is not a problem for you, you've got the ocean. It's everything is yours to try out. It's fantastic. The world is, I meant to say the world is your oyster. I don't know where the ocean came in there, but anyway, it's a fantastic time just to go and try. The fact, when else in our lives have we had that? When you were at school or university or getting a job, it all matters too much. The success and failure bit is very pressured. Doesn't matter now. Give it a go. It'll work, it won't, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's such a different way of coming at things because, like you mentioned, Victoria, when we're younger, we're so driven to a goal, right?
Yeah.
And a means to an end is kind of how we've lived in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So it can feel, I would think for some people, it would feel a little bit, the uncertainty, or it would feel a little bit too loose or maybe a little too difficult to define, not my personality, but
we do the 20 conversations, and we give people a structure there. Go and start having the conversations, because that's where things happen from it. I don't want to keep going on about it, but that's such an easy place to go and just talk to people, ask them questions. What are you doing? What challenges have you got? Could you do with help? And just start from there. And actually, when you hear other people's problems, I've always found, mentioned I have a lot of time in hospital, and actually it's a real leveler. And you see some people's lives are so challenging and so difficult. Honestly, you come out feeling $1 million and thinking, I'm really sorry for them, but I've got such a great life. It may have seemed a bit tough in hospital, but honestly, it's so good. And actually seeing people who've got a lot of other challenges is very good, and it keeps things in perspective for you. So I think it's very good for all sorts of reasons.
I think that the possibilities, Victoria, are exciting because in a lot of the ways, some people have done a career that they loved, some people haven't just fallen into something. Like some people have fallen into it. Some people do it because their family does it. Some people find the thing that they love. And I think that it's like, you could go as far as say, have you ever written a book? Do you want to paint? Do you want to travel? Do you want to write a blog? Do you want to, there's so many things that people can do and try. Yes. And that getting out of that means to an end, finding, this is where I think I struggled. You're trying to find the thing. But you've mentioned the word many times. It's a journey.
One thing leads to another. One thing leads to another. And it's very exciting. And honestly, technology, and I know COVID was pretty horrible for just about everybody, but there were good things out of it. And one thing was, people really starting to use and interact online in a different way. I sometimes think, how bad would my health have to be before I couldn't do anything? And I imagine myself in an iron lung where you can't move. You just have a mirror. I could still mentor some young people. So, how amazing is this technology? So you might be incapacitated at home, as long as you've still got your brain, in your mind. And that can be difficult when that starts going. I recognize that. But there's an awful lot of opportunity that you could do sitting from home or going into your little village, helping people. In this country, we have a lot of pubs. Well, we still have some pubs left. Go and have a drink there and sort of ask how things going. And someone might say that little children's group could do with a hand, or someone starting a business, they'd like to just talk things through. People around you everywhere who would just love your skills. And you have got so many skills. You have life skills, and you haven't even understood how valuable they are. You can look at things and think, I know what's going to happen. You can judge people and kind of spot people, their weaknesses and their strengths. It's extraordinary, the skills we have by this age. It's amazing. We need to use them.
That is a huge gap for us, is recognize our own worth in the world, isn't it?
It is.
Because I think, to be fair, our worth is decided by our income or by our rank in a job. And so without those infrastructures, then for the first time maybe in our lives, we're having to look at ourselves and know ourselves and have faith in ourselves in a different way.
You're right, Gina. That's a really good way of looking at it. Yes. A bit scary. It's also exciting. It is really exciting.
Well, I would love to have you anchor in for us. Now you've mentioned the 20 conversations, which I'm sure is one of the top points, because that's such a brilliant way of getting started, is to just start talking to people and finding out. Because you know what? They're like little bits and crumbs that you could find in these conversations that may lead somewhere you hadn't thought of. Because sometimes when we're stuck in our own head, we can't come up with something new. We need an outside perspective. So what are 3 things you really want to encourage people? They might be going into this unretirement phase, or they're there and they're feeling a little bit like they're floundering. What 3 things would you encourage them?
So talk to your family. Talk to people around you. Make sure that you're all on the same page. I haven't got time now to tell you some of the ghastly mismatches between husbands and wives, or, whatever. Massive expectations. Some very funny stories. They weren't at the time for the people, but they are quite funny. So talk to your family and make sure that you all know what you're wanting to get out of this stage and help each other. Secondly, the 20 conversations. Go and find the people who are really in the hub of things, who know lots of people, and go and just meet them and ask them what they're up to, what challenges. And then make a real effort to make new social connections, because you will have lost a huge number from your work colleagues. You possibly still see an odd one or two now and then. That's great. But you need to build new social connections. This is where people become isolated in old age, because they don't start doing it from now, to build up a whole new community around them. And it's not just your dear school friends and family there. You need new connections in different ways, and they will come out of some of those conversations. But make an effort to build those connections so that you have got, at the end of the first year, you think, I've got 20 new people I know, or 50 new people that I see fairly regularly, and that is good.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, Victoria, how can people find you and get in contact with you?
Okay, well, I'm of course on LinkedIn, and our website is next-up.com. Don't forget that hyphen. And you can find all sorts of free materials there, loads and loads of videos, lots of blogs with loads of tips. I've got one which it says something like starting with a blank sheet. If you type in blank sheet on our website, it comes up. So if you're starting from scratch, I take you through lots of ideas, and the 20 conversations is in there. And you'll find all sorts of things in there, and other people who share their vulnerability. They haven't had a good time, an easy time on this. So you're not alone if you're struggling, but it will get better, and you will have fun, and good luck.
Community, right? That community piece.
It is.
Well, Victoria, I want to thank you so very much for bringing your passion, your excitement, your vibrancy to this conversation. Thank you for taking your own unretirement and turning it into something that empowers other people. It's so incredible to have women like yourself to look forward to. You're ahead of me, and I can be encouraged and inspired by the way that you choose to engage with your own life, your time, the world. And it's so wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and sharing that.
Thank you for asking me, because I love doing, you might have gathered, I love doing this. And thank you for asking me, otherwise to be in my own little corner with nobody else. So thank you, Gina, and good luck to you and to everybody.
Thank you. Today, friends, if you are on YouTube, all you have to do is look down below. I will have the link to Victoria there so you can check out those resources from her. If you happen to be driving or walking and listening to the podcast, head on over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 312, and all the resources will be there. Today, I've been speaking with Victoria Tomlinson, founder and CEO of Next Up, TEDx speaker, and unretirement advocate. Friends, this conversation is so, so, so important. I want to bang this drum all day that our lives don't end with our jobs unless we choose that path. We have so much inside of us to offer. And maybe we haven't had the opportunity to tap into that potential because the job possibly limited who we are and what we have to offer into the world. So it's important for us to shift this conversation around our value and worth and not having it be boxed by a job that we have, because we are the resource. It wasn't the job. It was what we brought to that job. It's what we bring to the world in our relationships. And so I want to empower you, and I know Victoria does as well, that there's so much more for you to experience, do, and be. And you get to be a big part of that decision-making process. I know life happens. It happened to me, but we still get to engage with this conversation around who am I and what do I want to do with the years that I have left? Because friends, if we have 20 or 30 years left to live, gosh, imagine what you could do with that time. It could be one thing, it could be 10 things, and all of that is okay. Let's just keep moving forward together and making a difference and living with purpose. Thank you so much for being with us today and for taking the time to listen to Victoria's story and her passion. I ask you to continue to return. Share this conversation with your friends. Start this conversation with your friends. Share this resource and light a fire in the unretirement community and begin to change the world. I look forward to sharing more inspiring people and conversations with you in the weeks to come. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.